Our final one for this session of 3 external ones is Chris Scott from Bishop Burton, who is going to talk about meaningful competencies. So over to you, Chris.
Hello. We've had a bit of problems with the technology here and sharing screen, so Dom's going to be I think it's going to be a next slide, please, situation. So
people should be able, people should be able to see it. So yeah, we will have the next slide, I'm afraid. But,
yeah, okay then. Right then. So so my name's Chris Scott from the University Centre at Bishop Burton. I'm programme leader for ecology and conservation programmes at the University Centre. So we are a University Centre based in a FE college. So I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a moment. So thanks, Tom. In terms of the kind of presentation, just give a bit of a context to the case study, and then the introduction to our programs and our relevant professional body, which is Symposium, which is Chartered Institute for Ecology and Environmental Management. Then a little bit about the methods we used or used in really looking at our competencies that we currently have and looking at how we can kind of sort of develop those for the next round of sort of revalidation that we have, and really assessing what we do at the moment with competencies, and how we can kind of sort of develop those. Looking at the results of that and then the key outcomes and kind of sort of going forward from there. So thanks, Tom. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we're University Centre, HCI in East Yorkshire, based in the land-based FE college. Our programmes are validated by the University of Hull. That's not all of the programmes within the University Centre, but certainly our wildlife ecology and conservation management and some animal sciences delivery as well, criminology and so on. So a variety of different programs validated by the University of Hull there. And we actually moved to from LOs to PCs in 2023, just to as kind of before really the whole kind of sort of CBAS sort of project started. So we were developing competencies really without the kind of sort of support and sort of feedback that Dom has kind of sort of given, Dom and Andrew have given more recently through this sort of CBAS project. Since then, we've obviously kind of sort of worked with them, and that's really got us thinking about the competencies that we have at the moment and how we can develop those going forward. Okay, Dom, thank you. So one of the things we wanted to look at, particularly with our programme, really was the competencies that we have at the moment as a broad umbrella for what we do at a module level. So we're really looking at this programme goals level from the sort of CBAS framework. And part of that, I really wanted to look at how our programme competencies that we developed before CBAS kind of sort of compare with the professional body competencies set out by Symposium, and see how we could kind of sort of develop those using the CBAS framework. When we first went to programme competencies, I kind of had an idea that competencies, and when they were first being talked about, would be very much like the kind of set out with the professional bodies and their competencies. I thought it'd be an easier process to kind of make those two kind of consistent with each other. But the way that competencies came about within what we were doing, and through the kind of validation process, actually meant that I felt we came out with something that was quite different in a lot of ways to what the competencies sort of set out by SIEM in that way. Thanks, then Dom. Next slide, please. Thanks. So just a bit about our programs then. So we have quite small cohorts, so generally less than 10 at each level, and we have students that are seeking careers in sort of ecology, conservation, wildlife, biodiversity, wildlife management, this sort of thing. And these are just some examples of some of the destinations of some of our graduates over the years, competencies and sort of post competencies as well. So it kind of sort of gives you some idea of the range of professions really and roles that our graduates kind of sort of go into, and for them actual accreditation by SIEM and being able to demonstrate the competencies that SIEM kind of sort of recommend and accredit is that that's really important for them and for them to be able to put onto CVs and things as well. Our course isn't accredited by SIEM, but we like to use the SIEM sort of framework, competency framework, as a guideline really in terms of what we put into the program and how we sort of assess that. There might be an aim at some point to actually get our program accredited by SIEM, but for the moment we are just focused on trying to use SIEM as a benchmark really for our programs in that way. So graduates have gone on to all these different careers. We need to kind of sort of make sure that they're equipped for that. Okay, next slide, please, Dom. So SIEM then talks a little bit about it. It's a professional body for our industry, if you like, and it publishes this competency framework, and anybody applying for membership of SIEM needs to show how they meet certain parts of that framework. So their competencies are grouped into themes, which I'll introduce in a moment, and anybody applying for membership needs to demonstrate that they meet seven of those competencies at an appropriate level. And some HEIs have SIEM accredited programs. As I say, we don't at the moment, but we use it as guidance there. Okay, next slide, please, Tom. Okay, so I won't read through all of these, but just to give you a bit of a overview really of how the competencies compare. So our program competencies are on the left-hand side. I've edited them down a bit just to make them a bit easier to read, but one of the things around our competencies is some of the wording in them. So I've just edited them down, just taken the main points just to make them easier to read, but it gives you a fair idea of the sort of things that are appearing in our competencies, similar to what's cropped up in previous presentations as well, such as collaborative skills, communication, personal, professional sort of skills and things like this. You'll see there at the bottom that we only have 2 competencies that are specifically aligned with specific ecology and conservation sort of type skills. So we have very kind of transferable skills at the top there, and then the 2 at the bottom need to cover all of the kind of technical aspects of it. as I say, we want to kind of sort of see how we can sort of develop that to maybe sort of change the balance of that in the future. And again, working with bearing in mind these SIME competencies is something we'd like to do. SIME competencies on the right there, you'll see the themes, so they're grouped into two overall areas, technical and transferable. And as I say, anybody applying for SIME membership, SIME membership is a really important thing for a lot of students to have on their CVs when they're entering the sector, particularly for ecological consultancy. So we want to see that we're consistent with these competencies in a lot of ways. Okay. Next slide, please, Dom. So we undertook a couple of things. So first of all, as program leader, I did a bit of a cross-referencing of competencies, what we had and what was in the competency framework. So the picture on the right there, the image on the right, is the SIME competency framework from the PDF. You can sort of download this from the internet. So I went through a kind of process of really cross-referencing where I felt we kind of sort of met the competencies and so on. What I found was that although I felt we were meeting a lot of those competencies, they weren't really kind of sort of explicit in what our documentation said. So that was something we kind of sort of need to look at. What we also found was that although we have a lot of transferable skills competencies in our framework, they didn't always particularly align with the transferable skills competencies within the SIME framework. So we had in terms of the sort of language there, but also the kind of sort of technical skills as well. We were kind of sort of missing out on a lot of those. So we tended to kind of sort of focus on things like surveying and so on, and perhaps missed out a bit more on things like environmental sort of impact assessments and things like this. So it did throw up a lot of kind of sort of anomalies there. Okay, thanks, Tom. Next slide, please. For the student workshops, so we had 5 students, so we have quite low cohort numbers. So although it's only 5 students, it's actually represented just under half of our sort of student cohort at the time. The students were kind of, sort of briefed on CBAS and the Marvel sort of framework. They were asked to focus on specific roles. So within the framework, SIME gives some example roles of and what people would within those roles would likely to be shown in terms of the SIME competencies. So they were asked to select those roles and to Dom, I think we're seeing your thank you. So they're asked to select those roles and then to see how they matched up with those SIME competencies. And they're asked a number of questions there, which you can sort of see about how they felt we met them and so on. Okay, thanks, Tom. Next slide, please. So just in terms of what came out of that. From the program leader's perspective, again, felt more kind of sort of surveying, scientific method, evidence-based approaches and communication were quite well covered, but significant gaps in others. Language wasn't really consistent with SIME, which is a big part of this idea of PCs being meaningful. We're not specifying sort of targeted assessment SIAM competency levels. So SIAM has a sort of membership grades, and we kind of sort of felt we weren't maybe specifying targeted assessment at those competency levels. Is it relevant? Covers much of the academic lifelong learning, personal and societal aspects, but lack of coverage of SIAM transferable competencies may mean that professional element is lacking. So that would be things like professional ethics and standards, project management, things like this. And are they valuable? And we've felt that it could be made more valuable with the addition of kind of sort of amendments of PCs for students going into industry if we had more specific competencies there which they could show employers. Thanks, Tom. Next slide. And then from the student's perspective, they were able to work with the competencies, so they understood a lot of the language within the SIAM competencies and how that matched with the PCs, but it was a struggle with them. They were able to do it, but it was a challenge. Those aren't obvious, and we need to make those more explicit. Assessment tasks are sometimes unclear, they felt. Continued teaching of skills is necessary. So, for example, things like GIS, we need more to embed that within a range of modules going right through the program, rather than sort of separate GIS sessions, if you like, which we felt we did anyway, but the students told us there was more work to do on that. Students noted the academic focus of the PCs and the industry focus of the SIAM competency, so perhaps a bit of a mismatch there. And they would have liked more involvement from stakeholders within sessions. We do have guest speakers in, we do sort of site visits and things like this, but they would kind of sort of like more of that within their sessions, and particularly in the design of the PCs as well, and in teaching. Thanks, Tom. Next slide, please. So key outcomes then, I won't read through all of those, I'm running short of time, but I think a lot of this I've kind of sort of said already. So it's just really a bit of work, more work to do there on aligning perhaps the pieces that we do have with SIAM. So next slide, please, Dom. And then going forward, during the programming planning this summer, we've focused on development of contact with external stakeholders, changed teaching sequences to include more guest speakers, but also more sort of skills development, and the assignments have been reviewed as well in light of all of this. And then long term, we'd like to revise the actual PCs themselves for the next revalidation processes. There are some challenges in terms of meeting the validation requirements of the university, and also because we have competencies shared across programs, if we change PCs in one area, then we have to change them in another. So okay, I think that's it. So any questions from that?
So thank you very much, Chris. Much appreciated. I
Thanks,
hope
Thomas. Thank you, Chris. That was good. There's quite a few comments in the chat as well.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to.
Yeah. Well, there's one question from Anna. Are you working towards, I suppose, bridging that gap between the academic language and the industry focused language? What are your plans for addressing that?
I think we almost need to go back to the kind of drawing board a little bit on that. When we first put the program together, we did work with external providers and students to kind of sort of get feedback and so on. But I think the competency thing was quite new to us, so we were still just feeling our way through it. I think we kind of know a lot more now about how competencies work in practice and so on. And I think that's going to make it easier for us to look at the SIAM competencies and see how we can kind of sort of embed those ideas in what we do, because we're also aware that we can't just wholesale take SIAM competencies and sort of put them into our program unchanged in any ways, as it were. So I think a lot of the work we've done with yourself and Andrew, Dom, is really going to help in that. And actually, I've been with the other two talks I've just been on, I've been furiously writing down ideas to kind of sort of bring into that, and also the talk we went to, the online session with SIAM a few weeks ago as well was really kind of sort of instructive. So I think it's a long-term thing in terms of the developing the program competencies at that level for the next revalidation. So perhaps over the next year or so to see how we can kind of sort of do that. I don't know if that answers the question, but
yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah,
and I agree. I think there is, it's sort of going back to the drawing board, isn't it? To do that, and I think that's an issue. Seen it from the student side of things, is the language. They hear one thing at university, and then they hear other things outside of it. So it really is that bridging, and not an easy fix. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's a really important point, because a lot of our students are actually working in the sector or volunteering a lot in the sector, so that they're able to kind of see both sides of it, and they often can see where it doesn't quite match up. So they can give us feedback on that, certainly, that when they tell us that things aren't quite sort of consistent, that they're coming at it from a kind of sort of informed perspective a lot of the time from the industry side of things. So that's really useful as well.
Brill. Thank you very much. Thank you very much,
Okay.
everybody. I think we're going
Thanks, Tom.
into. Thank you very much, Chris. It was much appreciated. Yeah. So